Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Joey Francis, your life, love, and relationship coach. Thank you so much for joining me. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about this podcast, and I've noticed I spend a lot of time telling people to walk away. Now, if somebody clearly doesn't fit what you need, I don't believe you should spend 3 years trying to negotiate them into being a different person. Dating is supposed to help you discover whether someone belongs in your life. Once the answer is no, staying longer rarely changes it. And I strongly believe that. But I started thinking about the other side of this conversation. What happens when someone truly fits your life and a difficult problem puts a relationship under pressure? Have we become so good at identifying reasons to leave that we've forgotten how to recognize a relationship we're saving? Because fighting for a valuable relationship is very different from wasting your life with someone who doesn't fit. From the outside, both situations can look like refusing to give up. The difference is hidden in what that commitment is producing. Someone could be holding together a relationship that has no healthy future, while someone else may be helping the person they love through the hardest period of their life. And it's not the same thing. And listen, this is a difficult line to find. There isn't a calculator that weighs every fight and missed promise, then tells you whether the relationship is worth it. I mean, if that existed, it would make my job so much easier. Real relationships are complicated because a bad period can distort an otherwise good partner. Deep love doesn't prevent someone from making a mistake and causing pain they would never wish on their partner. So I want to talk about staying. I want to give credit to the people who don't immediately run when love becomes inconvenient. There's something beautiful about two people facing a real problem and deciding that the relationship deserves an honest attempt to repair. The goal is knowing what you have before you throw it away. People love the idea of unconditional love. And I mean, it sounds romantic because we want to believe somebody could see every part of us and remain certain. One terrible moment shouldn't have the power to erase years of connection. But romantic love can't be completely unconditional. If your partner repeatedly destroys the safety of the relationship, are you required to stay because you promised to love them? Most people would say no, which means behavior can create a condition that love can't overcome. You may continue caring long after the relationship becomes impossible. That feeling doesn't obligate you to keep building a life around someone, as I've mentioned countless times in different episodes. So yes, romantic relationships have conditions, as they should. Personal safety always comes first. Anyone living with abuse or fear needs protection and qualified support before considering anything. The beautiful part of unconditional love lives somewhere underneath the literal definition. I don't think most people are truly asking for permission to do anything they want without consequences. They want to know they won't become disposable the moment loving them requires patience. And that's a very reasonable thing to want. Nobody wants to spend years building a relationship with someone who keeps one hand on the emergency exit. You can't relax into love when every disagreement feels like an audition you might fail. Eventually, you stop being honest because the truth feels too risky. Security allows people to admit when they're struggling and take responsibility without assuming the relationship will disappear before they have a chance to make anything right. Communication, acceptance, and repair, as I've mentioned a million times. The better word for that kind of love is durable. Durable love can take a hit without immediately collapsing. It bends when life puts pressure on it. Then both people figure out what has to happen next. I think that's what a lot of people are actually searching for. They want a partner who can distinguish a difficult chapter from the end of the story. Most love stories spend all their time showing us how two people get together. It was just meant to be. We bumped into each other on the street. It was love at first sight, etc. The credits roll shortly after they finally choose each other, which is convenient because nobody has to watch them deal with their first serious disagreement. Real commitment begins after that moment. It lives in the ordinary. The conversations where someone admits they've been failing the relationship and the other person stays present long enough to hear the truth. No dramatic music plays and nobody running through an airport. Just two adults simply sit at the same table and decide what they've built matters enough to change their behavior. That part of love rarely gets celebrated because from the outside, it doesn't look exciting. In fact, people can even look at it and think that it's weak. People who believe self-respect requires immediate departure. Now, see, that belief can be useful when harmful treatment has become the relationship. But during a repairable crisis, confidence may mean knowing one painful period hasn't erased the value of everything around it. Reality is what decides that. Commitment remembers the whole person while dealing honesty with the part that's causing an issue. Granted, anger may be completely justified, and staying only becomes meaningful when those emotions lead somewhere useful instead of getting buried under the idea that loyal people should remain quiet. Durable love asks more from both people. The culture around relationships doesn't always help with that distinction. We have access to more advice than any generation before us. And honestly, some of it has helped people recognize damaging situations and leave. We can't take away how valuable that has been, but it's that very same language that can become dangerous when ordinary friction gets treated like proof that the relationship is toxic and every compromise is viewed as self-abandonment. After one bad reaction, somebody online is ready to diagnose your partner's entire personality from a 40-second video. Then you open up a dating app and you see thousands of possible replacements waiting behind a screen. They look incredibly easy to love because they haven't had a chance to annoy you yet. Your imagination fills in everything the profile can't show. The new person communicates perfectly and somehow knows which side of the bed you prefer without asking. Of course, that fantasy is going to win. Reality is standing in your kitchen with flaws. The fantasy is still using its best profile picture. The constant awareness of alternatives can change how people approach repair. Instead of asking whether the problem in front of them can be solved, they start wondering whether another person would have even ever created it. Perhaps they wouldn't. Although, take it from me, somebody that's talked to a lot of people specifically about this, a new person would eventually introduce a whole different set of problems. Every relationship eventually introduces you to something you wish were easier. Stress may reveal a side of your partner that you don't fully understand, but its existence doesn't automatically mean you chose wrong. Compatibility means the problems you encounter don't destroy the foundation you're trying to build on. This is where the blueprint method really matters. Your blueprint helps you choose someone who fits the life you actually want based on needs deeper than chemistry. It protects you from becoming emotionally attached first and asking important questions after you have already lost your objectivity. Once you have chosen someone who meets those needs, you can't keep treating them like they're disposable every time they struggle. A blueprint tells you whom to choose. Commitment tells you what to do when that person turns out to be a human. Remember, their humanity doesn't earn permanent immunity from your boundaries, but a relationship with realistic issues still deserves consideration before a hasty exit. Then there's, I can't live without this person. And I understand what they mean, especially when the connection feels deeper than anything they've experienced before. But that feeling alone doesn't prove the relationship is right. Some of the most destructive attachments can make separation feel impossible. Let's look at a healthier way to express it. Life without you is possible, and building it with you is still the future I desire. See, that commitment is grounded in choice. You remain because their character and the future of the relationship still makes sense even after the current problem is considered. When that's true, love deserves some fight. I've said it many times that communication and acceptance are the two most important things in any relationship. In an earlier episode, I even added what I believe belongs directly behind them: repair. See, communication brings the problem into the room. Once both people can accept its reality, repair changes what happens next. An apology, it only begins that process. I'm sorry means very little when the same damage keeps returning with a new explanation. You can have a 3-hour conversation that reaches all the way back into childhood and still wake up next month inside the exact same problem. At that point, you're processing without repairing. See, real repair changes the relationship after the conversation ends. The person who caused the damage has to understand its impact and take responsibility for what happens next. Their behavior should eventually make the relationship safer in the place where it was hurt. But let's not forget this. This is very important. Repair still takes two people. Once an apology is backed by constant change, the injured partner has a decision to make. If they choose to continue the relationship, forgiveness has to become genuinely possible. True forgiveness allows the new behavior to matter without turning the old wound into permanent evidence against the person. Forgiveness may take time. Nobody should be rushed into acting fine, and the person who caused the damage has to be patient while trust catches up with their effort. An apology becomes a reset button when the behavior doesn't change. Even real improvement can leave the relationship on permanent trial when no path back to trust exists. Either situation will wear love down. Repair is part of what makes staying beautiful because it turns endurance into progress. Together, you're doing more than surviving another round. You're creating a relationship that handles the problem better than it did before. I gave an exercise in that earlier episode where one person speaks and the other explains what they heard before responding. It sounds almost too simple, but many couples are arguing with different versions of the same event. Neither person can repair what they refuse to understand. See, that exercise also connects to something I have talked about recently. Communication requires the ability to receive a truth without turning it into a war. Your partner may say, "This is hurting me," and your first instinct could be defending your intentions. You know you didn't mean to cause that pain, and that matters, but the impact is still sitting there waiting for attention. Repair begins when understanding becomes more important than winning. Then something has to move. Maybe the problem requires a new agreement or professional help. The exact solution depends on what happened, but it must exist outside the conversation. Love can't live on explanations alone. This becomes especially important when someone is dealing with addiction or another serious personal struggle. A partner's support can make an enormous difference, especially when that belief helps someone remember who they're trying to become. Some people are alive and healthy today because someone they loved refused to reduce them to the worst period of their life. That deserves to be celebrated. Recovery still has to belong to the person facing the problem, but love can stand beside them. But the choice to recover must still belong to the person recovering. They have to be in the lead in saving their own life. This is where support can quietly turn into supervision. If the relationship only works because you're constantly managing another adult, the stability belongs to your effort. Your day becomes organized around preventing the system from failing and cleaning up when it does. Eventually, you stop being their partner. You become the structure, holding them together. And there's one question that cuts through a lot of confusion here. If you stopped managing the situation, would their progress continue? An honest yes suggests your support is helping someone do their own work. When progress collapses without you, the relationship may be borrowing its stability. That's the point where commitment can become self-destruction. Staying with the right person requires you to disappear, or shouldn't require you to disappear. When your health becomes the payment keeping them functional, love loses its beauty. The goal is a relationship where support strengthens responsibility. Security should make it easier for the struggling person to say, I have a problem and I'm going to deal with it. If your loyalty becomes the reason they avoid changing, the relationship is moving in the wrong direction. Someone has to feel safe enough to fail without being protected from every consequence of failing. And see, that's a very hard balance. It also explains why conditions don't cheapen love. A healthy condition sounds like this: I love you enough to help because improvement is possible as long as responsibility remains yours. That is very different from promising to remain regardless of what happens. Unconditional love. The relationship gets a real chance without receiving an endless one. How do you know whether the chance is still worth giving? Look beneath the current pain and ask whether the foundation remains healthy. Does this person still have the character you originally believed they had? Or have you been defending a version that only exists in your memory? A realistic path forward also has to exit because some damage can be repaired. Any solution that requires denying a fundamental need will eventually fail. Even with a possible solution, progress depends on both people participating. Strong feelings start the question while mutual effort answers it. You should be able to see movement over time. Perfection is an unreasonable standard, especially when someone is changing a deeply rooted behavior. Progress becomes visible when they take initiative before you push, particularly in the moments where the old pattern used to take over. See, that change might take time while still moving in the right direction. Promises without movement creates a loop. Every crisis produces a burst of action that disappears as soon as the relationship feels safe again. Pay attention to what happens after the fear of losing you passes. That will often tell you whether they want to change or simply they want the immediate consequence to go away. There's another question worth sitting with. If nothing changed from this point forward, would you choose this exact relationship 5 years from now? Don't answer based on the person they could be. Use the relationship as it exists today, right now. When you can honestly say yes, the problem may be a difficult part of an otherwise meaningful life. You can decide that the whole relationship is worth the cost of working through it. A no means hope needs evidence before it earns more of your future. One imperfect week doesn't justify leaving. The real danger is confusing time with progress. Difficult seasons can feel terrible while gradually becoming healthier. Damage becomes a cycle when the same wound keeps returning underneath it. You have to know which one you're living in. And please be honest about what the problem actually is. See, sometimes couples nearly destroy a good relationship because they turn one issue into a verdict on the entire person. A forgotten obligation becomes a courtroom argument over whether your partner has ever cared about you. That kind of escalation makes repair pretty much impossible. Talk about the behavior in front of you, including what it changed inside the relationship and what you need going forward. The other person now has something real enough to respond to. You're a terrible partner creates a fight over identity. When this happened, I lost trust in this part of our relationship, and I need to see this change. See, that creates a problem that can be addressed. The conversation won't go well either way, but at least you will learn something useful. If they can remain present and help create a solution, the relationship has material to work with. Defensiveness may appear at first because nobody enjoys confronting the worst part of their behavior. What matters is whether their ego eventually makes room for your experience. And see, you also have a responsibility when you decide to stay. Don't agree to repair while secretly keeping the relationship on permanent trial. If someone has genuinely changed and you choose to continue, there has to be a path back toward trust. Bringing the old version of them into every disagreement will eventually destroy the progress you asked them to make. Forgiveness allows their current behavior to matter without erasing what happened. This is difficult because protection has a long memory. You may see them doing everything differently and still feel your body prepare for the old outcome. And then granted, that fear deserves honesty, as it should. It should become part of the repair instead of a private test they don't know they're taking. When trust is still difficult, bring that truth into the conversation and explain what would help you feel safer. Your fear won't disappear overnight, but giving it a path will help you overcome it eventually. Repair belongs to both people, once the person who caused the damage has taken ownership. After the harmful behavior changes, the injured partner slowly makes room for that progress to become real inside the relationship. And that's how two people move forward together. And I think this is the part I think deserves more attention. There's courage in staying when leaving would be easier. And I'm talking about real love with a foundation strong enough for both people to face the thing that hurt them. Walking away can protect you from ongoing damage. With a repairable relationship, staying at the table long enough to solve the problem can restore peace. But more importantly, create a bond stronger than it has ever been. We hear a lot about the courage required to leave, which, granted, has saved people from wasting years in relationships that were slowly destroying them. Staying also takes courage when you allow someone to be imperfect without immediately reducing them to their mistake. You remain honest about the damage while still believing the person is capable of better. That faith can change a life. Think about what it means to be loved during a period where you're difficult to love. Most of us will have one. There will come a time when grief changes your personality for a while, taking away the energy and patience you normally bring into a relationship. Would you want your partner to judge the entire relationship by that version of you? Probably not. You would hope they remember your character while holding you accountable for how your struggle affects them. That's what durable love offers. It says, I see what's happening and I understand it can't continue this way, but we can solve it. See, there's no fantasy in that statement. This kind of commitment is more meaningful than unconditional love because it recognizes the cost. The person staying has looked directly at the problem and decided the relationship still deserves effort. That choice should never be taken granted for. If someone stands beside you while you rebuild part of your life, respect what they're giving. Their patience should increase your sense of responsibility instead of giving you permission to delay. For the person staying, commitment doesn't require blindness. You can love someone generously while measuring the reality of what is happening. This is the balance I want to find. Discernment keeps you from giving years to the wrong person and walking away too quickly when the right relationship asks both of you to grow. Discernment's role changes after dating. Early on, it gives you the courage to leave a bad foundation. Commitment asks whether a painful problem can be repaired before you tear down everything built around it. That's why knowing what you need matters so much. Without a blueprint, you can't tell whether you're defending a healthy relationship or protecting an attachment. Everything becomes an emotion. A good week convinces you to stay. Then one argument makes you imagine leaving. Your needs give you something steadier to evaluate. Does this relationship provide the kind of life and treatment you decided were essential? Is the current problem changing that foundation, or has it temporarily placed pressure on it? Those questions are far more useful than asking whether someone else might be easier. Someone else is always going to be easier in your imagination. The person in front of you is the only one you can evaluate honestly. So before you walk away from someone you deeply love, make sure you're responding to reality rather than discomfort. Have the conversation that scares you and gives repair a clear path. What happens afterwards will tell you whether anything truly changed. Perhaps the relationship has been asking for honesty rather than an ending. Another possibility is that you have been carrying it alone. Either answer gives you clarity. When two people show up and make real changes, celebrate the repair that kept pride from becoming more important than the connection. Give credit to the person who stayed during a difficult chapter without losing themselves inside of it. The struggling partner deserves recognition as well when that support makes them more accountable instead of more comfortable. There's something beautiful about reaching the other side of a problem and realizing that neither person treated love as disposable. An anniversary counts the years. The meaning often lives in what the two of you learn to repair during those years. That history becomes part of the relationship's strength. You know, a difficult conversation isn't automatically the beginning of the end. Trust grows from the knowledge that both of you faced something real before and found your way through it. That's the closest thing to unconditional love I think a healthy romantic relationship can offer. The promise has limits, yet leaving won't become the first solution to every problem. Both people agree to listen before deciding and give repair a genuine chance whenever a healthy future remains available. That's durable love, patience held inside healthy boundaries. And when both people understand the value of what they have, that patience can become one of the most beautiful parts of the relationship. Thank you so much for joining me. For more of my work, you can find my books, coaching services at joeyfrancis.com. That's joeyfrances.com. And just like I said, you can find all kinds of the stuff that I work on. So until next time, be good to yourself, especially yourself, and be good to each other. And before I go, I want to leave you with this. Knowing when to leave can save your life. Knowing how to stay can help you build one. Until next time.